Welcome to the session on discussing compliance framework for NGOs, financial management, execution, and reporting. It's an important session that will help us as nonprofits across the world to stay compliant with many of the statutory regulations that we have. Joining us this morning are very two distinguished experts with experience in this field. And we're joined by Mr. Olarinde Michael Olufemi, who is a tax policy expert, a chartered accountant, and assistant director at the Federal Inland Revenue Service. He has specialty in tax policy legislation and research. And right after him is Dr. Adhere, a development expert with over a decade experience in democratic governance and many other fields of civil society or development engagement. He's an expert in business development, grants management expert, and providing strategic support to civil society organizations. He's a JESI expert as well. So you can begin to imagine the level of expertise that we have in the room today. Please call your friends, call your colleagues to join so that they can benefit from this very important session that, as I've said, would help us in taking charge of our internal controls, but also helping us to be able to comply with statutory regulations as it were. And the run of play for today will start with an opening remarks and brief welcome from Mrs. Pedri Bekwe, the CEO of Sterling One Foundation. Then we'll listen to Mr. Olarinde, followed by Dr. Adhere. And after that, you will hear about Giving.ng and Sterling Cares. Then we'll take your question and answers. And after that, we will deploy a survey that will help us understand a couple of things around the sector and also the work to do. And then we'll have our closing remarks. And to start us off, can I check if I have Mrs. Pedri Bekwe on the call? If not, can I get someone from the team that will be representing her? I understand she's in transit at the moment. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Sheyi Yebisi. Thank you for your support always. On behalf of Mrs. Pedri Bekwe, I welcome you to this impactful webinar, and she sends her warm regards. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, she cannot be here herself, but you are in good hands. Thank you to Mr. Femi Olarinde for joining us to ensure that we as NGOs and civil society organizations are positioned with structure and the right tools and techniques for us to scale and increase the work that we do beyond borders, because this is a very sensitive topic that play a good role as an NGO if we want to scale our impact beyond the borders of even Nigeria. So she sends her warm regards again. I want us to get our pens, papers, and let's just get ready to receive all that we have from the wealth of knowledge of the knowledgeable panelists that we have today. So thank you very much again, Mr. Yebisi.
Thank you so much for standing in for Mrs. Pedri Bekwe, the CEO of Sterling One Foundation, whom I'm aware is attending another conference in Cairo, but has a conflicting schedule with travels as well. Having said that, let me thank Mr. Olarinde as well for the sacrifice. I am aware he's in New York at the moment, and I know the time in New York can be very tricky at this time. So thanks for waking up so early for you to join this session and to share from your wealth of experience. So we'll listen to you between now and 10:43 thereabout. Over to you, Mr. Olarinde.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Mr. Olusheyi, and thank you to Sterling One Foundation, Mrs. Pedri Bekwe, for giving me the floor to speak to NGOs and CSOs alike. Yes, I know that I'm bringing knowledge to them. However, the knowledge can only be brought to people who want to have it, and that is why I am saying thank you also for having me. This morning, I'll be speaking about, already the topic has been given, So I'm going to be sharing my screen right now so that I can start my presentation immediately. So let me know if you can see my screen. Hello?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So I'm going to start just
Do you want to
immediately.
put
So I'll be speaking
presentation
on
mode?
yes, I'll change to presentation mode now. No problem.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So is it okay now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. So like I'll be speaking on compliance framework for NGOs, financial tax management, execution, and reporting. We all know that NGOs play a critical role in our society, in our countries, wherever we are. And NGOs also leverage on supporting, they actually support government where government cannot reach. So that is why it's very important for them to also know that for government to support them. So what NGOs need to know is that when there are exemptions or some kind of waivers to them, what government has also find it a way of financing or supporting or also donating to such NGOs because of the kind of job they do. So these are the policy behind the fact that the government grants tax exemptions and waiver and zero-rated to NGOs because it's a way of also financing such NGOs through the tax that they would have collected and they actually forgone. So that is the basis. So we need to start, and NGOs, and why does NGO need to know to comply with the necessary framework, rules and regulation is also because NGO leverage on getting grants and donations from international agencies and the rest. The reputation of such NGO is also, it's good to have a good reputation so that you can be able to fulfill and get such grants. So today I'll be speaking on what the compliance framework, and I'll be narrowing on Nigeria since we are speaking from Nigeria. So to start, what do we actually, so we could put it in perspective, what an NGO is and what I am speaking to this morning. So for me, an NGO is a not-for-profit organization, typically incorporated as a company limited by guarantee under Part A of the Companies and Allied Matters Act in Nigeria, or unincorporated trustees under Part C of CAMA, or registered under local government edicts in Nigeria, or registered in a foreign jurisdiction and approved as such in Nigeria. So they have the object of advancing a given public good and not to carry on trade or business. So important to stress this because it is important to stress this because NGOs are not seen to be in business. So they are not to carry on trade or business for the purpose of making profit for distribution to their members. And I'll be explaining this in full details later. So NGO may include organizations such as organizational institutions and companies engaged in ecclesiastical, charitable, benevolent, literary, scientific, social development, cultural, sporting, or educational activities of a public character. So it's important to stress that NGOs the activities should be of a public character. So now, when we talk about, let's start with the obligation. Now, the NGOs, as much as in creating, it is important for them to register the NGO before even commencing. So you may have any form of registration, whether it's as a company limited by guarantee, corporate trustee, or whatever. After that registration, every company, so they are seen as a company in Nigeria. So every NGO has the status of a company. However, because they have that status, they also have the obligation to register with the tax authority for tax purposes. So, and NGOs are required to register. And when they register, they obtain what we call the tax identification number from the relevant tax authority. And I'm also going to break that down later, what you mean by the relevant tax authority. Now, what do you require to register for tax purposes? One, a copy of the certificate of incorporation or instrument of incorporation, certified true copies of your memorandum and articles of association or constitution, a current tax clearance certificate of the trustees. You need a list and profiles of your trustees or board members, then duly completed input registration data form, and any other relevant document requested during the registration. So this is the typical documents you need to register, and which all this can be. So registration can be either manual or electronic. Most agencies in Nigeria right now have gone electronic, so you can easily register your NGO for tax purposes. The next one. Now, when we talk about, I spoke about relevant tax authority earlier. In Nigeria, we operate what we call fiscal federalism. And fiscal federalism simply means that we have three levels of government. We have the federal, state, and local government. And the three of them have what we call fiscal autonomy to manage to collect revenue as it concerns their jurisdiction. So at the federal level, we have the Federal Land Revenue Service, which is responsible for collecting the taxes listed under. We have the State Fundamental Revenue Service, which is also responsible for collecting the taxes listed under, and the local government revenue authority. It's important to state that it's not at all times a company or an NGO pays all the taxes that are listed, but they can pay depending, can pay one or the other at a particular time. It's just trying to let you know what kind of taxes is applicable in Nigeria, which is the jurisdiction of the tax authority. Someone's, can somebody help me check? There's a noise that is, okay, thank you very much. So the next thing is, let me start with the company's income tax. And this is the one that concerns most of the NGOs, especially those registered as either companies limited by guarantee or incorporated trustees. So I start with NGOs are generally exempted from paying companies income tax on the income derived from their approved activities, except where the NGO engages in any trade or business. So we have a provision in section 23(1)(c) of the Companies Income Tax Act that exempts businesses, 23, that exempts profit of companies engaging charitable, ecclesiastical, benevolent activities. But that exemption is limited to the fact that they do not carry on trade or business. Now, why? Yes, because if you want to carry on trade or business, you are only allowed to register a company. And so when you register such, you are allowed to do business. But when an NGO starts carrying on trade or business, such NGO is going to compete with a normal company. And so if NGOs is getting exemption from their profit and you're competing with a normal company, it's of course, it's not seen as being fair to the normal company. So that's why they say, insofar you do not carry on trade or business, your profit will be exempt. And also in determining the fact that your profit is exempt, and so when you carry on trade or business, you want to tax your money, a government still consider and say, okay, because there is an exemption in the law that exempt profit of companies that is less than 25 million turnover from being charged to tax. So they are exempt. So what it means is that if an NGO also carries on trade or business and such turnover is not up to 25 million a year, it will be exempt from income tax. Now, under the company's income tax, all NGOs also have the obligation to file tax returns. So the fact that NGOs are exempt, profit of NGOs are exempt from paying companies income tax does not mean they will not file tax returns. So when we talk about compliance framework, this is one thing we need to, as NGOs, need to take note of. You need to file your tax returns. So Section 55(1) of the company's income tax mandates all companies, including those who are even exempt from registration, to file tax returns. And the typical tax returns contain an audited account, a tax and capital income tax and capital allowances computation, a declaration that the information provided in the returns are true and correct, a report duly signed by the trustees or any authorized person, and filed on or before the due date, being 6 months after the accounting year end for all NGOs and within 18 months from date of incorporation for new NGOs. Now we move on to personal income tax. Under the Personal Income Tax Act, NGOs registered under the state or local government laws shall all have the obligation to also pay taxes on income derived from trade or business to relevant tax authority. So for NGOs whose registration are not either incorporated trustees or limited by guarantee, probably maybe the register under local government edicts, they are supposed to pay to the state relevant tax authority, relevant state where they reside, because the personal income tax is based on place of residence. So if you reside in Lagos or you reside in Ogun State, in Nigeria, your tax will be paid to Ogun State, being if you are not an NGO registered under as incorporated trustees or limited by guarantee. So now, aside from that, the fact that NGOs are exempt, profit of an NGO is exempt from income tax does not also mean that their staff are exempted. So these are some things that many NGOs have not taken note of. So their staff are residents of a state, and those states we collect taxes, and NGOs are required to register with the relevant tax authority for purposes of deducting income tax from the employees under the payee scheme. So the payee scheme is a scheme that allows employers to deduct a certain amount through the computation of personal income tax from the salaries they pay to their staff and remit to the relevant tax authority according to the residence of their staff. So the NGOs have the obligation to register, have the obligation to deduct and remit tax from the employees' salaries or emolument, and they have the obligation to file tax returns. So NGOs are also mandated to file tax return with relevant tax authority and pay the emolument of their employees in the preceding year, not later than 31st January of every year. So that is after you have deducted those monies and you pay it to the NGO, you paid it to the State Board of Internal Revenue. That payment is supposed to be made on or before the 10th of the preceding month, the month preceding the month of deduction. So you remit that to the state, and then at the end of the year, by 31st January, you are expected to put together all the documents, all the schedules of staff, how much you deducted, and also file that as your annual tax returns for showing that you did this in the previous year. Now we go to value-added tax. Part 3 of the Value-Added Tax Act provides a zero rate for goods purchased for use in humanitarian donor-funded projects. So what it means is that when NGOs purchase any form of good for the purposes of carrying on their charitable humanitarian activities, it is so the VAT on such will be zero rate. So when you say zero rate, what it simply means is that the rate to be applied on such is zero. So there are cases where such NGO may be required to pay the VAT, but once it's zero rate, he has the benefit. He can request for a refund from the tax authority, because there are cases where you get to the market and you tell the market, oh, I'm an NGO, so you are not supposed to deduct VAT from me. And there's some will say, oh no, I don't know about that. The tax law say once I pay anyone, I service anyone, I need to charge VAT, so you have to pay. So what it means is that you can come back to the tax authority and request for a refund if such happens. However, many people understand the fact, and they also apply zero rate on their invoice for such NGO. So what is the rate of VAT? The VAT is 7.5% of the gross amount on the invoice. However, if you check the provision of the law says on goods purchased. So the law did not exempt services supplied. So if you purchase a service or use a service of a professional to carry on something for you, such is not exempt from VAT. So VAT will be chargeable for services. So if an NGO now take the service of an accountant to prepare its books, the accountant has the obligation to charge VAT on such. And so, however, if it's goods that you're using for your humanitarian project, you want to, let's say you are supplying materials to the IDP camps, of course, such will be zero rate. You're providing educational materials, you're providing even furniture to schools, you're providing, so those things that we see as benevolent activity, they will be zero rate. Now, the NGOs also have the obligation to charge VAT on taxable goods and services supplied and remitted to the FIRS. Now, I know many NGOs many people who have NGOs now carry on businesses and trade. So an NGO has acquired capacity in a particular thing, maybe a professional service or whatever, and when you're given that, you have the obligation to also charge VAT. And when you charge such VAT, you collect and remit to government, and the appropriate agency when it comes to VAT is the FIRS. Now, we have what we call the self-account for VAT and remit. So what self-account means is you have someone has rendered service to you, and when I render the service to you, it did not charge you VAT. However, because it's a service and the law says that it's chargeable, VAT is applicable, what it means is that you will charge yourself and remit to the tax authority. Or we also have small companies, which are companies with turnover less than 25 million. Such companies are expected not to charge VAT. So when you receive services from such companies, the law says you should charge yourself the VAT, put them together and remit to the FIRS. Now, the NGOs also have the duty after charging VAT or deducting or self-accounting, self-charging, you have the duty to also file returns of the VAT returns on or before the 21st day of the month after the month of purchase or procurement. Now, the next one is capital gains tax. Capital gains tax is tax on gains derived from disposal of chargeable assets. NGOs are generally not liable to CGT. However, assets acquired in connection with trade or business carried on by NGOs, the gains from such disposal will be chargeable to capital gains tax of 10% on the gains. Now, I explained that if an NGO decides to carry on a trade or business and it acquires an asset for that purpose, let's say an NGO decides to go into transportation services, it acquires a vehicle. If the NGO decides to sell that vehicle after some time and it makes gains, such gains shall be chargeable to what we call capital gains tax. Now, however, if he decides to plow that gain into his charitable activity, where a subject loss, it will not be chargeable to tax, it will be exempt, even though, although the asset that was disposed was from a business income. It doesn't matter at that time. Once it plows back to do that which is his object loss, it will be so exempt. Now, the NGO also have the duty to file self-assessment returns. Now, under the Capital Gains Tax Act, there are 2 cycles of filing in a year. So you either file on 30th June or you file 31st December. So where an NGO make a chargeable gains within the 1st of December in a year to the 31st of May in the following year, the NGO will file the returns by 30th June. So there's a 1 month to allow the NGO to put together everything he has done, to prepare his accounting, his calculations, and file the tax returns. And so if he does also from that June to November, he can file the returns by 31st December. Now, we have what we call withholding tax. Withholding tax, it's not a tax type. So we say withholding tax is an advance payment of income tax. So NGOs who give out, we know NGOs give out contracts. So of course you need to perform an activity, you give a contract for somebody to supply you materials, you need to go to schools, to maybe for NGOs in education. You give out contract to someone to supply you books, to supply you pens, to supply you all those things, or you need to go to IDPs, you give somebody's contract to supply food items. So all these are contracts. When NGOs carry on such contract, they have the obligation to deduct what we call the withholding tax from the payment made to such person. So withholding tax is an advance payment of income tax of the recipient of payments. So that to that contractor, you have just helped such contractor to pay part of its tax. When you deduct withholding tax. And when you deduct same, you remit to the relevant tax authority. Now, when I say relevant tax authority, for a company, if it's a company, you remit to the FIRS. If the contractor is a company, if the contractor is an individual, you remit to the state internal revenue services, or according to residence of such contractor. Now, after that, you also have the duty to file withholding tax returns. And the return is filed on the 21st day of the month preceding the month which the deduction occurred. So withholding returns are to be filed along with schedules containing the details of service providers. So if you give out about 20 contracts in the month of January, by 21st day of February, you are supposed to remit such withholding tax with a schedule of the 20 contracts, the amount of the contract, and the applicable withholding tax rate, and the amount of tax that you have so deducted and remitted. So it's mandatory to issue, and when you do same, it's mandatory for you to issue what we like a receipt for tax withheld from such contractors, so that they could also have a proof that you have deducted such money from their payments and you are remitting to government. So when you are preparing your schedule, you need the TIN of the service provider. You also collect the tax identification number of such service provider, the nature of activity or service for which the payment was made, the gross amount paid or payable, amount of tax deducted, and the period to which the deduction relates. Now, these are withholding tax rates in Nigeria. So if what you are paying for, or it pertains to the following activity. So if it's a rent, you are paying, interest you're paying, dividend you're paying. If you are paying it to an individual, you can see the rate as applicable. But if you are paying to a company, this is the rate you are going to deduct. So this is the withholding tax table in Nigeria. So without, you can go through it without, so this is what we call the withholding tax rate. Now let me move on to save time. Now, aside from, and everything we've been talking about is about record. You need proper record to be able to fulfill all this obligation we're talking about. Even aside from, for tax purposes, I believe every registration bureau requires that you keep proper records, and proper records for different purposes, whether for your trustees, your stakeholders, and also the tax law also requires that every NGO keep proper records. So NGOs are statutorily required to maintain books of records of accounts containing sufficient information or data of all transactions, as well as accurate record of employees. Such record must be kept for a minimum period of 6 years after the year of assessment in which they relate. So the aim of this requirement is to ensure accountability for tax purposes, as the relevant tax authority is vested with the power to request for and inspect such books. Now, record. Failure to provide records or books prescribed attract a penalty of 100,000 in the first month in which the failure occurs, and 50,000 for each subsequent month the failure continues. So this is a penalty for not keeping records. Now, I started that penalty with for not keeping records. There are other penalty applicable even for other things. Now, under the Companies Income Tax Act, failure to file a returns attract 25,000 naira in the first month it occurs, and 5,000 naira for every subsequent month the failure continues. So, in the first year, this will be first year. So now, oh yeah, it's the first month. So if you are expected to file returns in June and you did not file it, that June you'll be charged 25,000 naira. And when it gets to July, you're charged 5,000. Another July, August, 5,000. So if the tax authority did not come to you, or did not see you even for 3 years, you've been escaping. The day they come to you, the day your first returns was due, they will calculate all your penalties accordingly. Not because you've not come for 4 years. When they come, they will charge you 25,000 and 5,000 for once. They will charge for each years that you have not come. And so many times the taxes, the penalty outweighs what you're supposed to do, the cost of complying. So like for returns now, if you did not carry out any trade or business, you do not need to pay anything for filing returns. It's just to go to them and show them evidence of activities you have carried out in a year. So for failure to file withholding tax or deduct or remit withholding tax within 30 days from the day payment is made or credited, also attracts a 10% of the tax not deducted or remitted. So the fact that you give a contract to your supplier, a contractor, and you did not deduct withholding tax from the contractor's money, and the contractor goes with the money, the law says that you have the obligation to pay such money as a penalty. And you pay another penalty on top of the money of 10% of such tax, and also interest at prevailing monetary policy rate of the Central Bank of Nigeria. So you can see that they said obedience is better than sacrifice. The penalty here is even more than sacrifice. So under the Personal Income Tax Act 2, if you fail to deduct payee from the salaries of your staff, you have committed an offense and you attract a penalty of also 25,000 naira in addition to payment of the arrears of the tax due and failure to make payee deduction account. And you also pay 10% per annum of the amount plus the interest at the prevailing commercial rate and recoverable as a debt from the NGO by the relevant tax authority. VAT, failure to render VAT returns, or you render an inaccurate returns. The FRS shall also issue you the best of judgment. So what they do is that they look for your bank account, take the turnover on your account and slam you a 7.5% tax and also a 5% fine on the unremitted money and per annum plus interest at commercial rates. And you also pay the unremitted tax. So you can see the failure to comply, the failure of compliance is grievous. And sometimes people will say, catch me if you can. Have now integrated with many of our financial suppliers and also even many companies and agencies that we tend to relate with. And the law, especially the Establishment Act of the FRS, gives FRS the power to what they call the power of substitution. So they can ask your bank to freeze or to place a lien on your account and pay any sum that they have charged on you as a tax to them. So it is as big as that. Though this power has not been used so much, but the tax authority has that power. And so we need to know that it's better to comply than to wait for such. So the next one, where an NGO is aggrieved, so dispute resolution under CETA and VATA, so that is the Companies Income Tax Act and the Value Added Tax Act. Now, it's also known that tax authority may sometimes inadvertently issue tax assessment that are not accurate, or an NGO is just aggrieved about some issues. He has the opportunity to also appeal against some of the judgment. So we say when an NGO is aggrieved or dissatisfied with any notice demand of assessment issued to it by the relevant tax authority, the NGO must serve the tax authority with a notice of objection via delivery, personal delivery, electronic means, or courier service within 30 days of receipt of such notice, demand, or assessment. We operate what we call the voluntary assessment, voluntary tax in Nigeria. So you have to do what we call a self-assessment, where you have earned income, where a company has earned income in Nigeria, the company has the obligation to itself calculate its income and remit the tax. So where you do not do so, that is when the tax authority now raises assessment. So where this provision is saying that where a tax authority have raised assessment on you, or sometime you calculate, you file your tax returns, and the tax authority believe that what you have filed is either inaccurate, they can also, through their own review, raise an additional assessment. And so this provision says where they have raised such assessment on you and you are dissatisfied, you do not agree with them, you have the obligation to appeal that assessment reject within 30 days. They say if no notice of objection is filed by the NGO within the time stated, the issue assessment will be deemed to be final and conclusive, except where the NGO applies for an extended time on the grounds that the person who ought to respond was out of Nigeria, however, this was the provision before now. Now the law says you can send such objection through courier or electronic means. So this provision may be outdated because the tax authority will argue that you are not in Nigeria, but you can file through electronic means, or even you can use a courier service. So you can't give that excuse. Now, also, if the disputed tax is unsuccessfully negotiated or mediated, and then the NGO remains dissatisfied, the NGO has the right to appeal to the Tax Appeal Tribunal within 30 days of receipt of the tax authority's decision. So a further right of appeal can also be taken to the Federal High Court if you also dissatisfied with the Tax Appeal Tribunal, and that is another within 30 days of the TAT decision. So these are to provide succor and provide good distance for taxpayers to ensure that they can exhaust all the available mechanism when they are dissatisfied. Now, for NGO to be able to comply well, these are some checklists for compliance. One, you need to designate compliance officer or a tax consultant who will help you ensure that you're doing the right thing and not run foul of the law. Also, register with relevant tax authority and obtain a tax identification number. All NGOs should ensure that they have a tax identification number. Also, file annual returns when due. So whether it's the tax annual returns or the one for the company's bureau, registration bureau, like the Companies and Allied CAC, Corporate Affairs Commission. Also deduct and withhold tax from payment made to service providers. Deduct withholding tax and file returns and remittance within 21 days of the preceding months. Deduct tax from employees' salaries, emolument under the pay scheme, and remit same alongside the returns to the relevant state Internal Revenue Service on the last day of the month. Then pay VAT and collect VAT where applicable, and keep accurate records for a minimum period of 5 years. So this is like a brief thing to note for NGOs for compliance. Now, aside from paying taxes, every NGO wants to receive donations and grants. The law has also, there's a law providing for NGOs that want to be marketable. So, of course, you always have to write write proposal for grants. And so you need to package yourself. This Section 25 of the Companies Income Tax Act provides a basis for NGO to be able to market themselves. Now, this provision can list an NGO under what we call the fifth schedule of the Company Income Tax Act. The fifth schedule is a schedule listing NGOs that are allowed to receive tax-deductible donation. And what a tax-deductible donation is? A donation which, if anyone makes to you, such amount will be allowed as a deductible expense. It will be allowed expense by such company. So a company wants to donate to, let's say, Sterling One Foundation, or maybe let me use this typical one. Sterling Bank donates money to Sterling One Foundation. The amount donated by Sterling Bank to Sterling One Foundation may be exempt from tax to the extent that it meets some requirement, which I'm going to list. The first one is that the donation is made out of its profit for that year of assessment. So if you are making a donation that exceeds the profit of that year, it will not be so allowed. So you have made 100 million naira and you are donating part of that 100 million naira that same year, it will be allowed. So it won't be a donation you have made prior years and you want to claim it in this year. No. Or donation you want to. So that is what the law says. The total donation shall not exceed 10% of the total profit of that company for the said year of assessment. So whatever you are donating should not be more than 10% of the total profits. That's the profit to which such company is to pay tax on. And such donation is not a capital nature, except where the donation is made to universities or tertiary research institution or any developmental purpose. We should not exceed 15% of the profits, total profit, or 25% of tax payable in line with the provisions of Section 25A of the Companies Income Tax Act. So an NGO requiring to be listed under fifth schedule to the CTA may apply to the Minister of Finance for enlistment through the FIRS. So now I'll be concluding now. There is a general notion that NGOs are totally exempt from taxes. This blanket exemption does not apply, as the policy behind the exemption of NGOs need to be understood in applying this incentive. As much as the sustenance of NGOs is paramount, it is important for NGOs to understand the limitation of their object in relation to taxation policy. There is need to have a dichotomy between charity and business. NGOs also need to understand that even when profits derived from their activities are tax exempt, there is a reporting obligation to file tax returns to provide transparency in their activities. Consequently, it is important for NGOs to ensure compliance with relevant laws, including taxation rules and regulations. And I say thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Olarinde. I'll let you grab coffee so that we can listen to Dr. Adedeji. Then we'll then take the cue. And it's been a lengthy session, very educative. But please grab water, pap, akara, or coffee so that in the next 25 minutes we'll come back to you for questions and answers. Dr. Adedeji, you have the floor, please. Be reminded that Dr. Adedeji has PhD in Political Economy and Development Studies. Dr. Adedeji, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. And thank you, Dr. Olarinde, for the excellent presentation on tax management, compliance, and framework. I am not able to share my screen yet because you are still sharing yours, but please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. You may just want to
Okay.
increase the volume a bit, if that is correct.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
You should be-
So yes, I'm able to share now. So very quickly, we want to be talking about how to make your annual impact report work for you. So basically, we are in the development sector, and there's need to continue to sustain our interventions through demonstrating results to our donors and becoming self-sustaining to drive our organizational objectives. So this session will be focusing broadly on the impact report, and specifically, how do you use those impact report to expand your funding base to continue to drive the interventions you're working on. So we're going to start by, so why tell a story? At the individual level, you tell a story to inform, to convince, to create empathy, and to communicate experience. It's not so different from what we do in the development sector for not-for-profit when we document our results. Within the context of monitoring and evaluation, we're going to be talking about outcomes of our intervention, because there's no one project that makes an impact in terms of the M&E term. So the literal meaning for impact in this context will be, oh, we have been able to support communities, we have been able to really impact our environment. But within the M&E phraseology, we'll talk about outcome. So basically, for not-for-profit, we want to be able to demonstrate experience and impact to raise more money, to deliver better results, and then deepen our donor relationships. So all conversations we are going to be having around it, we'll be talking about how do we expand our funding base. So what are impact stories really? A narrative statement that combines both qualitative and quantitative evidence to our readers on what we have the capacity to do as an NGO, how we demonstrate our effectiveness, our experience and results. And that's what donors are really interested about. They want to see that as an organization, we have the capacity in terms of systems and structures to be able to deliver on whatever we may be seeking. But let's go to why impact stories are important. Number one, for accountability. So if we have received funding from restricted funding sources or non-restricted funding sources, we'll get to that in a jiffy. We need to be accountable, and one of the accountability requisites is what Mr. Olarinde spoke about, tax compliance earlier. Donors want to see that we are complying with all statutory compliance requirements for our context. Accountability first to the beneficiaries that we support, accountability to the donor, and accountability to ourselves as an organization. The next one is demonstrating experience and sharing experience and learning, which is also important. So when we write our impact stories, we want to be able to demonstrate that, yes, we have the capacity to implement this. We have learned lessons from implementing this, and then we have approaches to do that better the next time we engage such intervention. The other one is visibility. So for our organizational vision and mission, we want to also increase visibility for our organization and visibility for the donor. Donors like visibility, trust me. So visibility is one of the reasons why we write our impact story. So it gives us a better opportunity and positioning to really impact the space where we work. The last one there, which is what we are going to be dwelling on, is for fundraising purposes. And I must say at this point that there is a difference between resource mobilization and fundraising. So fundraising is just a strand of resource mobilization. So in resource mobilization, you are going to have the physical resources that you mobilize in terms of the buildings, the vehicles. Those are physical resources. You have the intellectual resources, things around your brand, what makes you unique and separate from other organizations. And then you have the financial resources, which is what fundraising is about. And then you have the human resources. So you see that resource mobilization is broader in terms of fundraising area. I just wanted to bring that quick insight so we know. But for this one, we are focusing on the fundraising component, which is the financial resources. So when we write impact stories, we really want to be able to show that we have expertise and experience to implement interventions in a way that is sustainable, is adaptive, and iterative for the kind of work that we do. But it's good for us to understand that when we write impact stories, we're also targeting specific audience. And within the context of the donor space, you are looking at institutional donors, development partners, trust foundations. You are looking at corporate organizations. Yes, there are organizations that, of course, every year they do their corporate social responsibility. So aside institutional donors, you are also looking at writing your impact stories in such a way that targets corporate organizations, high net worth individuals, and at times government, because there are interventions that collaboratively you work with government to execute without compromising the status of your organization. It's also important to understand, just put in some context, that while targeting donors, you need to be sure if donors are calling for impact stories or ability statements around grants. So for grants, you are going to be talking about funds that contracts, not contracts in what we sign, MOU and all of that, but contracts in terms of payments by results. You need to understand the donor dynamics and how you can better tailor your impact report to such donors in such a way that you can attract funding from them. There are types of funds, the restricted and non-restricted funding sources. Why it is called restricted is because institutional donors, a good number of times, have what they want to fund per time. And if you've heard about the entire conversation around rebalancing power or aid decolonization, donors are already asking questions. We have been supporting interventions in Africa for X number of years. So what? They are asking the so what questions. It's no longer designing interventions that just speaks to different components and sounding very, what we call isomorphic mimicry. So donors are asking questions. They are really seeking that impact in terms of achieving the set objective of the interventions. So you have institutional donors like FCDO. FCDO is Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, former DFID. And then you have USAID, Global Affairs Canada, and the likes of them. You have Trust and Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And why these are restricted is because donors already have their priority in terms of what they would like to fund per time, which is why it is important while you are writing your impact report, you have it targeted towards specific audiences. So there's no one size fits all on writing impact reports. But specifically from slides for accountability, for visibility, is your impact report for accountability? Is it for visibility? Is it for experience sharing or learning? And is it for specifically for fundraising? We're deepening fundraising component because this is one of the areas where we need to better expand our scope of our work. But for us as NGOs, we also need to begin to explore unrestricted funding sources. One of it we call the corporate fundraising, CSR. You have the crowdfunding. Crowdfunding gives you an opportunity, possibly on your website, to have a link, demonstrate your impact report, and anyone, anywhere might be happy to support the cause of your work. You have event fundraising, or organize events, investment fundraising. Some people do land banking, property acquisition, product auctions, financial instruments, shares. These are all restricted funding sources that makes you diversify the scope of your work and impact on what you can do, aside what the donors, the institutional donors may have defined. Other requirements of institutional donors, pardon registration if you are applying for an European Union call, for DONS, SAM, for USAID, CAC, anti-fraud registration, and like Mr. Larry said earlier, the tax compliance and audit reports are also very important. However, these are the context realities. The donor pot is shrinking, competitors are increasing. So within the NGO space, you have a lot of NGOs, civil society organizations, competing for the little funds available for interventions within the space. That's the number one context reality. The second context reality is that donors have interests and priorities, which is very important. So if your organizational vision and mission does not align with a donor interest or priority, it is difficult to attract funding from such donors. Sending such donors an impact report that doesn't align with their own priorities might just be an effort in futility. So we need to understand the context realities. The other thing about that is that donors have existing grantees they work with. So it will be, you need to be very demonstrative of results in such a way that is innovative and can really convince a donor to either expand the scope or the number of their grantees, or terminate one grantee to be able to fund your work. So it takes innovation, it takes effective programming, and we are going to see all of that in a jiffy. Another context reality is that donors have guidelines and compliance requirements. Donors demand accountability for all funds in terms of value for money principle, effectiveness, efficiency, equity, and what have you. Again, donors are like brides. You need to woo them convincingly. So for you to write an impact report that convinces a donor to fund your intervention, you must understand these context realities in such a manner that helps you to improve the opportunities for funding your organizational work. Now let's come back to impact stories. So a good impact story requires a lot of forethought, understanding of your target audience, creative writing to persuade. So persuasion is very key in writing in impact stories. Ability to convincingly persuade your whoever will be reading your report. Recall that 4 core reasons why impact report is important: for accountability, for visibility, for fundraising, and for experience sharing and learning. So for a good impact story, there must be a good understanding of the audience and how you write creatively for that purpose. Element of good impact story, it must be evidence-based. Recall when we defined impact story, we talked about the qualitative and the quantitative elements. So if you are saying that for this intervention, we have reached 5,000 or 10,000 beneficiaries, and beneficiaries now have increased capacity to harness their full potential, it has to be evidence-based. It has to be verifiable. It's an original. And that's one thing about writing good impact story. It must be persuasive and convincing. Elements of inspirational and emotive writing is also very important. So for some of us that have worked in very hard to reach rural communities, you will see that issues around water, sanitation and hygiene, wash is still very huge in some rural locations where the quality of water they have access to is really, really poor. So we must be able to show what it was, what we did, and then what changed in the course of our work. It must be factual and informing future programming. So how to craft a compelling impact story? Before you begin the process of building an impact story, ask yourself the following questions, which are very important. The first is, who is the audience for this impact story? The second is, what is the purpose? Recall we were able to talk about at least that, which is not all exclusive, 4 key reasons why you write impact story. 1, visibility. So what is the purpose of that impact story? Which platform is this story for? So like I said, there's no one size fits all in writing impact stories. You need to clearly define the audience, the purpose for the impact story, the platform which is for, and what problem with this story tackle. So if we want to demonstrate that we were able to solve a problem because we implemented an intervention, we need to write in such a way that speaks to the problem that was tackled. And what is the solution that the story suggests? And those are very important components of writing impact stories. I'd like to now, making your impact story work for you, number 1 is effective programming. What that means is impact stories does not exist in isolation of what you may have done in terms of implementing interventions across your focal locations. So effective programming will relate to compliance with donor requirements, in terms of reporting requirements, in terms of reporting templates, in terms of the MIL framework. The MIL framework is monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning framework, and how that helps you to really demonstrate impact around your work. Key around that also is documentation, effective documentation of qualitative and quantitative elements of your programming. And disaggregated data that speaks to the areas of work that your intervention is focused on. Number 2, making your impact story work. Donors love it when you spend money and achieve results within the ARR limit. ARR, the acronym means allocability, availability, and reliability. So donors want you to spend funds, and donors do not like to fund organizations that don't have the capacity to really spend the money and achieve the results. What that means is, it's not saying spend money just throwing it off on inefficiently or ineffectively. It's saying that ability to document and then comply with donor requirements as you spend the money and achieve the result. The other one is as you implement your intervention, it's important to look out for windows of opportunities. So you have said you are going to reach 10,000 women and girls on maternal health care, but then you observe that the men are also going through issues around lack of employment or something. Those are windows of opportunities you could leverage on and begin to speak to other donors or write impact stories to show that you also have the capacity to engage this space to address another issue that you have identified. And that's how exactly you expand your funding base in terms of your intervention. Writing quality proposals, it's another conversation entirely in terms of proposal development for fundraising, because in your proposal development process, you must be able to convincingly write your impact story into your proposal in such a way that it demonstrates capacity to the donor and ability to implement the intervention. And then join or make up consortium to apply for funding opportunity, which is key. Consortium, forming consortium, you bring your expertise. It helps you to be able to expand your funding base, bring your own impact story. A combination of several impact stories can help you to be able to attract the kind of funding you seek to continue to implement your intervention. Keep formal and informal relationships. Number 9 is very important. Send publications and information of the successes you are making to donor, either funded or not. There is a donor space. Donors speak to themselves, and they know organizations, NGOs that can really implement interventions and achieve the results. It is not just writing the impact stories report, it's providing evidence of what you have done in the past through a detailed capability statement, which we will talk about in a jiffy. Be active on social media. Donors take you out online. So your impact stories, you need to be able to disseminate effectively and well targeted to the audience you want to disseminate. So your social media pages, your websites, your LinkedIn pages, how are you leveraging on all of those platforms to disseminate your impact story, which is also important because donors really check, and then be accountable and deliver on your work. Now, what that means is that you need to begin with the end in mind. What I'm sharing on the screen now is the project management cycle. From the point of opportunity scanning to the point of closure and documenting, writing your impact story, you need to be very deliberate about the implementation of your project. From ideation phase, identifying the opportunity, taking a go or no go decision, understanding the donor requirement, if it is single stage or multi-stage call, developing a bespoke capability statement, and then designing your intervention theory of change, which is very key, because the strength of your impact story is dependent on how your project has been designed to really, be able to document and collect data that can help you write a convincing impact story. So from the initiation stage to closure stage, you continue to, work in such a way that it helps you write your impact story to be targeted towards specific audiences for specific reasons. From the initiation, project design phase, implementation phase, the quality of your implementation will determine how far and how well you can write an impact story convincingly. Sharing your impact story again, you need to define your audience, choose your storytelling channels, which is very key. Get help from supporters. There are experts who write impact stories and can help you document all of that. Create a continuous feedback loop, which is also very important. Three things around that are important. You need to keep donors informed, keep donors satisfied, and then keep donors visible. In writing your impact story, donors like themselves to be informed, to be visible, and to be satisfied in terms of achieving the results. So a few technicalities in writing impact stories. You need to begin to tease out the indicators that you have set out from get-go. You know, where low hanging fruit, where you can tease out the core outcome of your impact story from the indicators. So if you have said that one of your indicators is number of persons reached through awareness and campaign, for instance, at the end of your intervention, are you able to really document and say, yes, we have been able to reach X number of persons through awareness? So one of the areas to tease out your impact story is your indicator framework. Another one is the baseline report, where it was from before the intervention, what assessments were conducted, and what it is now, and the end line, midterm evaluation, and then end line evaluation, which is also very important. Those are areas where you tease out your impact reports. You can really see what it was, what it is now, and then the intervention that was done, and then what has changed is again about the story of change. What has changed since the intervention that you implemented? Before you conduct end of project evaluation, it will be helpful to run a mock evaluation, because this is where you tease out your core deliverables in terms of achievement of your results, and that helps you, that informs the kind of impact story you can write. The learning outcome for all of this is that you can revisit the project or the intervention. Recall that I said at the start, there is no one size fits all for writing impact stories. The strength of your impact story is dependent on your target audience, the platform for dissemination, and the purpose for the impact story, either for fundraising, either for visibility, for experience sharing and learning, or for accountability purposes. So you need to identify what were the lessons that you learned implementing the intervention, and what can be done differently the next time. Regardless whether the project lives up to or surpasses the expectation, it's about value generation and gathering insight and deriving practical lessons from the project that helps you demonstrate the impact. So when you write an impact story, you're actually looking at, how do I demonstrate capacity? How do I convincingly attract new funding opportunities to drive my organizational vision and mission? And trust me, that's one of the biggest challenges of NGOs in Nigeria, particularly for civil society organizations, mid-level, who may not be able to compete on commercial contracts. Like I mentioned, trying to draw a distinction between a grant and a contract. Trust me, a donor will not give you $500,000 or euros or pounds if what you have capacity to expend, your capability statement is showing that you have, in the last couple of years, you have only been able to expend $100,000 or euros or pounds. Donors look out for that. Your capacity to be able to accommodate, capacity in terms of systems and structures, in terms of policies that you have in place, your financial policy, your procurement policy, your program management, quality framework, all of those donors check out. And that's why when you deploy an organizational capacity assessment on your organization, you will be able to identify the gaps that helps you position your organization to attract the kind of funds, either by writing your impact stories or by really reaching out to apply for calls, donor calls, and then getting the funds to fund your organizational objective. So there's no one size fits all to writing impact story, but the basic structure, you must, of course, introduce like an executive summary of your impact story. What was the problem you were trying to solve? What's the justification? What is the story of change? How did you achieve the story of change through the intervention? What was the impact? And then what is the call for action? So if you write an impact story, there must be a call for action, which is very important. So I write an impact story. Was it to inform, to increase visibility, to raise funds? There must be something that the impact story seeks to achieve. In closing, you need to end your project impact story with a promise. The promise is the next time we implement a project of this kind, we will be as good or better. That is how to end an impact story, because you have learned lessons, you have documented lessons, you have surmounted challenges in implementing that. And that's what donors really look at. Your experience, your capacity to be able to implement similar projects. So this is my question to you. Do you have a ready and structured capability statement? Now, again, for capability statements, it has to be thematic based. So you can have a broad organization level capability statement. A capability statement that says, first, the caveat is a capability statement is different from a company profile. There are two different things entirely. A capability statement will also include what similar interventions you have implemented in the past, what were the results, who funded it, how were you able to manage that grant, and how were you able to document lessons in terms of achieving the set project objectives. So you could have an organizational-wide capability statement. You could also have tailored capability statements. For instance, if you walk around 5 thematic areas: education, governance, food and agri, women's rights, health, you could have a capability statement that is structured and tailored to health interventions. Your experience, demonstrating your experience around health thematic area. And why that is important is that you are always ready, when you are seeking donor fund, either from restricted funding sources or from funding sources, you are ready to, send in a cap statement that really demonstrates experience. So elements of the capability statement, description of the organization.
Dr. Ademefun, can I ask that you please quickly round up so that we can move to the next session? The 25 minutes is already passed. My apologies for that.
That's fine. The financial capacity, the human resource capacity, and experience and past performance, which is very important. This is like the penultimate slide. So I'd like you to reflect, what are the funding opportunities within the organizational impact stories, which is very key. Recall that we said we're going to deepen the component of fundraising. What are the funding opportunities within your organization's impact stories? Who are the donors that can be linked to each of these funding areas? How do you engage these donors and processes of your chances of getting funding for them? These are just some possible donor sites that you can visit and share your impact stories. It's also very important, and how it aligns with your organizational objectives. Thank you so much for listening.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Ademefun. And sorry if I didn't pronounce that very well. Says they're enjoying your presentation. Unfortunately, I had to rush you up a bit. My apologies for that. But let's take a quick commercial break, and that commercial break will be going to Sterling One Foundation, who will be talking to us about Giving.ng and the Sterling Cares product. Then we'll come to the Q&A. Don't forget to put your questions for both Mr. Olarinde and Dr. Ademefu in the Q&A box. Over.
Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you so much to our speakers and moderator. It has been so enlightening and power-packed. And I'm sure that most people are already asking, and we're going to be sharing the slides and the recording of this presentation. We want to say thank you so much again to our phenomenal and experienced facilitators. So very briefly, before we go to the questions and answers section, yes, we're going to be having that. I just want to share with you a little bit about Sterling One Foundation and how you can also partner with us for greater impact. Sterling One Foundation was registered, established in 2018 by Sterling Bank. It serves as a vehicle for social impact across critical sectors. And we see that focal areas are across health, education, youth empowerment, food security, gender equality, and climate action. We're very passionate about tackling the root causes of poverty, and those thematic areas are areas that we believe when we focus on them, we'll be able to get improvement in our society and the quality of life as a whole for us in the world. And so very briefly, I'm going to be looking at two partnership opportunities aside from this webinar series and capacity building. We also have other partnership opportunities to ensure that the NGO space and civil society organizations are better equipped to do the work that they do and influence their individual communities better, because we understand that SDG 17 is no longer competition, but collaboration that makes a difference if we are to achieve the heights that we want to achieve in line with Sustainable Development Goals. I'm going to be talking very briefly on Giving. And Giving is a crowdfunding platform. It gives you the opportunity to finance alternatively for your social impact project. And not only does it do that, we have something called a finishing grant. So we don't just, we don't just convene, we also help you catalyze the work you do. And this finishing grant is up to 1 million naira. Another thing about Giving is that we do not charge for this service. We don't take a service fee, so the Giving platform does not charge. What you might get charges for is the payment platform fee, not the Giving. We do not charge. It's a free service to the community to catalyze social impact. Like I said earlier, you can access up to 1 million grants for the project that you're passionate about. And we are open to partnering with everyone who wants to cause a change in the society. And that includes individuals, NGOs, associations, churches, mosques, corporate SMEs, states, local government. Everyone who wants to create change can be on Giving. Giving enables you to receive donations all year round, or monthly, or one-off. And it's a multimodal payment system. So you can make payments with your card, transfer, whatever is convenient for you. But most especially, we don't just say come and raise funds. We also support you to volunteer for the projects and causes that you're passionate about. And at the same time, we give you access to the grants when you meet the criteria. Very soon, I'm going to be talking about the criteria for meeting the grant on Giving. This particular initiative was by, I'm sure a number of you recognize him, Apoko Doctor. He's a foremost voice and prominent voice in the healthcare space, teaching us and sensitizing the general public on health rules, tools, and all that we need to live healthier lives. And so we partnered with them for the cervical cancer screening exercise, and they were able to qualify for a finishing grant of 500,000, for a grant of 500,000. Something remarkable about this project was we came to check, cervical cancer screening. Out of 411 beneficiaries, we're able to identify 70 women. Yes, that's it, 70 out of 411. We're able to identify them that they had precancer cells, and they were able to receive on-the-spot treatment using cryotherapy. Why am I stating this? Giving is not just a platform, but we're passionate about impacting lives. When I think of those 70 women whose lives will be changed because somebody chose to step up and say, I have identified this social impact problem, and I'm going to be the voice that solves it in the capacity that I have. And it doesn't mean you don't have to have all that you need, but you can start with where you are to reach out to the community where you are. And like I said, partnership is the new goal, because without collaboration, we cannot reach the depths and heights that we need to, and to move our country, nation, and the world forward. This is another story of someone, Angel for Life. I'm sure most of you know her. She's Nikki Laoye. She's a popular singer, and she came on Giving to raise funds for the Blind King Day. Something remarkable about this project was that I remember looking at this group of people that were blind, and they required sticks, white cane sticks, to be able to feel the environment and for people to know that they are blind and be cautious around them. One of the beneficiaries mentioned that because he couldn't see, because they didn't see him with a stick, somebody mistakenly hit him and he lost a huge portion of his teeth. Another person said, thank you for giving us cane, because cane is the eyes by which we see the world. So, like I said, it's not just about numbers and statistics. It's about real people solving real problems that affect our society. So we need every one of us, whatever areas we are passionate about, we are willing to support by catalyzing the work you do, even by giving you a finishing grant. So these are just few projects I've talked about. This year alone, on the platform, we've been able to partner with organizations to give over 100 scholarships. We've done so many things this year, and I know that there's no more time, but I'm just saying this to say that every sector represented, we need voices that are already there or want to go there, and we're willing to partner with you to make it happen. This is also a school. It's called a NFI school. It's a free school in Abuja. And the Run Club decided that as a club, when marking their anniversary, they wanted to do something. And they said, okay, this is a free school. They pick up Amaljiri children from the road. So these children could either get into the classes or get into the hands of the wrong people who could teach them, social vices that would end up affecting all of us as a whole, right? Because this problems are not in silos. And so when we had this NFI school come up, we're able to raise funds for a computer lab. So we have, as at the time it was raised, we had 55 children receiving, this is aside from the 100 children I spoke about earlier, 55 children receiving access to, digital skills. Why? Computer room. Why? Because somebody said, I want to crowdfund, I want to raise, and we're also able to add our bits to it. And that's why I said again, SDG 17 cannot be overemphasized. And so very quickly, how do you qualify for a grant? One, your project must be in either the health, education, food security, renewable energy sectors, or even gender sectors. Secondly, you must go through the due diligence check. So when you go through due diligence check and you've raised your campaign, you raise a campaign on Giving, and the amount to complete that campaign should not be more than 1 million naira. That's why it's called a finishing grant. So we don't want to give funding to people that even after we give the 1 million naira, they will not be able to execute the project. No, we want to ensure that if we're going to be giving some sort of funding, a milestone on that project has to be completed. And when all that is in place, you can send a request to contact@giving.ng. I'll drop it in the chat after this presentation. So any inquiries about this product, you can definitely send it there. The last thing sorry. Yeah, so also, when you qualify for these grants, we support you with execution. So one thing about us is we're a trust platform. We don't just give money and say go. We want to know what's happening at every stage. I can see one of our grant beneficiaries is on the call today. They're doing phenomenal work in Abuja region. Abi Griggs, I can see you. His project was not highlighted here, but thank you for joining us. So these are real people solving real problems and collaborating with the Giving team. Another thing is, because if you're a member of Nigerian network of NGOs, rather than having 100 donors, you need to just have 50. And people keep asking, why do you need other people to be involved? Why don't you just give us grants when we meet requirements? It's really simple. For sustainability, for accountability, we need to ensure that the people that know what we're doing are also involved doing. And it also helps in such a way that when people know this is what you're doing, when opportunities to scale come, they're able to send those opportunities your way. And we've seen that, you know, when somebody knows this is what you're doing, they're part of what you're doing, we're able to solve social impact problems faster together with partnerships. And like I said, everyone needs to be a part of it. We see that millennials are loyal to businesses that enable them to contribute to social problems. And for employee engagement, attraction, and retention, giving really makes the world go round. Right. I'm going to be talking about the second initiative. So this is also a government platform called ECOSHA, who are also on Giving. They facilitate healthcare for the vulnerable, and this is by the Lagos State government. I know. And lastly, I'm going to be talking about the first free banking solution called Sterling Cares. This solution was in collaboration with Nigerian network of NGOs, Sterling One Foundation, and Sterling Bank, and it's a solution that gives free banking. Yes, I said it's free banking to NGOs. So it means transaction fees. You don't have to pay transaction fees when you have this account. And to register for this account, you can either drop your details on the chat. Somebody, a representative, will reach out to you to tell you about this account. Imagine not having to pay transaction fees on the account. It's zero charge on all your transactions. And we commend the effort of Sterling One and Nigerian network of NGOs to make this happen, and Sterling Bank. Right. So what are the benefits of this account? No transaction fees. You don't necessarily have to have an initial minimum deposit to operate the account. It also has the added benefit of a digital solution, corporate internet banking, and you definitely get your notification and alerts. The requirements include your account opening form, the CAC document, articles of incorporation, and resolution of your chairman and secretary. These are some of the things that you require to open this account. Another thing is you need a signature specimen, identification in a nationally approved, government approved ID card. You also have, you need to have passport photograph. All these are documents that we already have as NGOs. And just, we're encouraging you to take advantage of this solution. It was created for you by people that understand your pay points, that know that every single penny counts in the journey of impact. And so final words before I hand over to Mr. Oyebisi. I want us to be bold about the stories that we are solving. Let's be visible. You cannot be an NGO today, on social media. Let the world know what you're doing, because without partnership, we can't do what we do. And we need to do that at an accelerated rate, because we have 200 million Nigerians projected to be 400 million very soon. And the problems keep piling up. But forums like this give us an opportunity to say, how do we partner? You're doing what I'm doing. How do we scale? How can I learn from what you have done so I don't follow the same mistakes? And at the same time, what we are doing is we are changing our world. We are executing exceptionally because we are leveraging on the resources like a forum like this today. And that's why, please, in the chat, make sure you introduce yourself. What do you do? What's your thematic area? Let's collaborate so that we can create constant value to the world that we live in today. Thank you very much. For any questions, you can reach out at the details being shared on the screen. On Giving, www.giving.ng is the platform. And if you also need to contact us, contact at Giving.ng. That will be also dropped on the chat box. Thank you very much for listening. Over to you, Mr. Ashe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome back from that commercial break. We won't be charging Stella One for this because they're the organizers of this. I do know that Mr. Larinde is ready and Dr. Demefu is also ready to now take your questions. I have a couple of questions on the Q&A chat. Please don't forget that if you have questions for both Mr. Larinde, who is a tax policy expert, and Dr. Demefu, who is a development expert, please put them on the Q&A session so that side of this app, and we can pick it up from there. Oh, someone is overwhelmed already. Mr. Olarinde, someone is asking. My overall question is, where do we listeners begin from? Where do you think we should begin from? Please unmute, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I think let me say an adage in Yoruba. They say when a sinner has knows his sins, the next thing to do is to seek restitution and start on a clean slate. So where you begin from, if you know you've heard, you want to start complying, I've tried to answer some of this question in the chat room already. And so what you need to do is to come forward to the tax authority, and especially you don't have a TIN. You first request for a TIN that shows you come to register, and from there you can start with it. Most tax authority will not do anything rather than accept you, like the prodigal son, and continue from there. So, however, it's only when they come after you for enforcement that they may not want to spare you. But I would say once you have known that, okay, you've not complied for a while and this is it, it's better to put yourself forward first. And even if you may need to pay any form of arrest, it may be negotiated to ensure that it is paid without in a very convenient way for you. So that's what I would advise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Larinde. And also for those of us that are into nonprofit law and policy making, on December 12th, the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and tax reforms will be consulting with civil society organizations. We can again engage with them at that level to please plead with FIRS so that they can give us some amnesty. Dr. Adebefu, someone is saying, do you have a sample impact story? Dr. Adebefu. By the way, Dr. Adebefu is joining us from Senegal. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you so much. So, like I said, there's no one size fits all for an impact story. Depends on what the impact story is for, who is the target. But the basic format is what I presented earlier. But I'm happy to see which one could be shared. You have
Oh, we're losing you, Dr. Adebefu. Do you want to move a bit? We're losing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear now.
Okay, so there's no one size fits all. There are a lot of samples on the media space, social media space. You could just research and see. Yeah, but the basic format is what I've shared earlier. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Larry, they're still taking from the Q&A box. Someone is asking, do we have NGO who are exempted from tax? I know you made mention of this, but maybe they needed some clarity. Do you have NGOs who are exempted from tax? Mr. Larry, please. Excuse me.
Okay, like I said, exemption, there is a general exemption for profits of NGOs from income tax. However, like I said, the exemptions is to the extent that such NGO does not go outside the subject laws. So you are an NGO, which means you are into charity, benevolent activity. So when you start going into trade or business, remember when Dr. was speaking, he spoke about sustainability. And I've also communicated with NGOs in recent time, and they told me that they've acquired some skills in what they do. So sometimes they go into contracting, sometimes they go into providing some services. When you start doing this, you have gone beyond the object clause, and you start you have gone into trade or business. And to that extent, such income derived from the trade or business will be liable to tax. And outside that, income derived from NGOs by NGOs from the object clause, which refer to benevolent and activities, will be as tax exempt.
So let me follow up on that, because majority of the question here are tax related. Does CIT apply to NGO sales of merchandise?
Yes, that's a business. Sales of merchandise, that's business. That's trade. Wow. Income tax applies.
Okay. What do you mean by NGOs registered with the state or local government? I think that should be straightforward.
I'm sure there are NGOs who are registered with local governments. Even some of them are the likes of the cooperative societies and the rest. They are also NGOs. So some are registered under the state edicts. Local government edicts. And so we've seen such before.
Oh, brilliant. Someone is saying, I learned there's TIN for state and federal. 1 minute. We have that of state. Can we still register to get the federal TIN?
Okay, you only have a TIN for state if you are an individual or an individual in business. So an individual is a natural person, you and me. While an individual in business, it's a person who has registered under like what we call business name. Because they are individuals, so their taxes are payable to the state, and that is why they have TIN from the state. And so, but if you are an artificial person, that means a company, you are supposed to have the TIN from the federal government, the FIRS.
Okay, so my understanding of that is if you are registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission, then your TIN will be federal based. Is that correct, sir?
No. Because if you are a business name, you are also registered by Corporate Affairs Commission. If you register as business name, but you are individual in business. So as that, you are not separated from the company. So you are not separated from the business. The person is doing business in a name. However, he is not separated from such, but he's still supposed to pay taxes to the state. Now we have what we call the joint tax board TIN, which tries to harmonize both TIN. So if you have the joint tax board TIN, you can use it across the state and the federal.
Okay, thank you so much. After filing for our annual tax through the platform, we realized that we were asked to pay for education and police tax. Is this the standard?
Yes, for every Nigerian company, you are expected to pay a tax called the tertiary education tax, and what they call the police trust fund levy. So for every company incorporated in Nigeria, for the education, for every commercial entity, the police trust fund levy. And these are all for those who engage in trade or business, because every other company.
So my interpretation of that is to say that NGOs, if they are not doing business, do not have to pay with the tax, the education and police tax.
They do not have to pay income tax, and when they don't pay income tax, they are not expected to pay that.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification. Some government agencies, such as media stations, always decline an NGO from subjecting their payment to withholding tax. How should we handle this?
Always decline NGOs from subjecting their payment to withholding tax.
Yes.
Well, like government agencies, you cannot charge government agencies withholding tax because a government agency is not a company and is not liable to tax. Have an issue. So withholding tax is an advance payment of income tax. So you do not charge government agencies. However, media stations is chargeable. You need to charge. That is the provision of the law. So if your customer says no, of course, you have a senior, a higher customer, which you're supposed to comply to.
Okay, excellent. So let me allow you to take some Fura de Nunu while I quickly come to Dr. Ademefun. Dr. Ademefun, I'll give you some 2 minutes to quickly talk about theory of change.
Oh, okay. So the theory of change is going to speak to how change happens. You have identified a problem, and then you want to say, if this happen, it's a concessional statement of if A, B, C happens, and then there are these assumptions that there is political will to drive this agenda, there is the willingness of the citizens, for instance, to be part of that process and contribute their quota, then we would solve maternal health issues at the primary health care centers in Nigeria. So a theory of change talks about how change happens, how logical the change would be from the point of what interventions we are going to do to achieve that change. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that crash course in theory of change. I understand how difficult that can be to explain, but you explained it so well. Thank you so much. When Mr. Olaride started his presentation, he said NGOs are meant to pay tax, and that, when you start an NGO, government is indirectly donating to you by exempting you from tax. But someone is asking, what is the benefit of paying taxes? Where does all that revenue go to? Also, is there any total exemption from taxes, especially when most NGOs have difficulties getting funds?
Well, I understand the fact that you have to read everything. You said I should take Fura de Nunu. Unfortunately, there's no Fura in New York.
Oh my.
So one thing, when you ask me where does all the tax goes to, I know you also know I can't answer that question. And
I totally agree with you.
So that is I see that question as a defense mechanism by Nigerian taxpayers when they do not want to pay tax. We all know that tax is a compulsory levy imposed by government, and we know what tax is meant for, what it's supposed to be meant for development of Nigeria by providing social amenities. To the best of our knowledge, we know that there are some social amenities, there are some infrastructure, but we cannot now be telling you, quantifying it to the taxes we pay. And that is why we say you should pay, you should ensure you fulfill your own part of the bargain before you can now ask this question, because they say he who comes to equity must come with clean hands. And so I would say, it says, what are the benefits of paying taxes? Of course, the benefit is that the first thing is that you have fulfilled your own part of it, and you can start demanding for the others to do their own bit. And of course, when we nominate government or when we vote to elect people into office, what we have simply said is that we have nominated our rights, our privileges to such people to take care of us, and the tax you pay is like sending them errands to provide those things that we're supposed to provide for ourselves. So I'm sure we have the basis to ask the question, and we have the channels of asking the questions, especially those that are close to us. Our elected representatives are some of the places we can ask the question. I am a civil servant, and my job is to collect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larinde. Pay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Education and police tax. What can we do even when we are asked to pay? Whereas we're not doing business, what can we still do?
Well, you are not, if you are not doing business, the law does not ask you to pay. Just know your rights and know what you're supposed to. Now, such taxes are not longer manual taxes. They are supposed to be taxes filed online. So, of course, no one can coerce you to pay such. No one coerces except when you do business. Now, the extent of your tax will be the extent of the profit you have made from such trade or business. So nobody will levy your turnover or your grant, the total grant you have received or donation, and ask you to pay tax on them. No. But if to the extent they can find that, oh, you have done some merchandising, you have, let me say you are a church, and you have put up a hall. Instead of the hall to be your church auditorium, you start running parties, you start renting it out to parties and all those things. You have gone beyond the object clause. And to that extent, the income derived from such halls will be subject to income taxes. And when you're paying such income tax, you pay every other adjoining taxes, associated taxes, like the education tax and the police levy. So that is
yes, Dr. Ademefo, thank you so much, Mr. Olairi. Dr. Ademefo, let me quickly come back to you. I like the way you differentiated between resource mobilization and fundraising, but I want to ask you, at what point should we start taking data or collecting data for impact stories?
Like I said, you need to start collecting data from the ideation stage of your intervention. From the point of ideating your project design, you need to start collecting data. The strength of how your intervention has been designed and structured will determine the kind of outcome you achieve and the kind of impact stories you can write to either inform or to either expand your funding base or demonstrate capacity or possibly increase your visibility. So in terms of data collection, it's important that from your MIL framework is monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning framework, from the structuring of your logical framework in terms of how your indicator targets are clearly defined, is going to determine the strength of impact story that you can write around your intervention. So from get-go, from the ideation to the actual implementation and then documentation of all of those processes, it's important to begin to collate the data that will be relevant. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Mr. Larry, I have a banger question for you. But before I ask you that question, I want the comms team to quickly deploy the survey so that we can quickly run that. Then I'll now ask you that banger question. It's very banger because I'm interested in it. It's something that affects me as well. So I want to know. But the comms team, please, can you quickly deploy the survey so that we can run this for as quickly as time can allow us. We're meant to have finished this by 12 noon, but I'm aiming that we'll stop by 12:10 at the very latest. But again, let me continue to thank Mr. Olarinde for waking up this early to join us from New York, and also Dr. Ademefo for taking time out of his trip in Senegal to also be able to join us. It's been very impactful, and I'm sure the over 100 that were coming in and out would they've appreciated this, and I'm sure there would also be continued opportunity for us to begin to learn. While we're still waiting for the comms team, let me also mention that, for us at the Nigerian Network of NGOs, this is particularly important, these conversations that we've had with Sterling One from the beginning of the year, convening important topics and themes that are important for the growth of the non-profit sector. This is the last one for the year, I think. Am I right? December is here. Maybe we'll have another one for December to round up. But it's also a good time for you to start thinking of your impact stories so that you can send to your stakeholders, government, donors, your beneficiaries, the public, so they know what you have done. I'm still waiting for the comms team. Again, while I'm waiting, maybe I should take okay, the survey is in the chat box. Please click on the link in the chat box and please continue to complete that. We encourage you to please do use this to provide feedback to us on the questions that we have asked in that bit. Mr. Olaride, my banga question. Is honorarium chargeable under the extant tax laws of Nigeria?
Okay. What we call honorarium, depending on what it is. You go for a program, and like I've made presentation to Sterling One now, they decide to say, oh, Mr. Larry, they take this amount as honorarium. So most of the time it's seen as expense incurred in having that program. Like now you invite me for a program, I come around. It's expected that I incur some expenses in coming. Probably I transported myself, I prepared to come and speak and all those things. So naturally, if it's seen as the person's main income, that is what you do for a living. Of course, it's your emolument. Now, for you who have received it, need to now put together and report such to the tax authority and pay your tax on them. So to that extent, it may be chargeable. So because it's an income to somebody. It's an income to somebody. So definitely it is chargeable.
Okay, a case study, because I need you to clarify that, Mr. Olari. As Executive Director of the Nigerian Network of NGOs, I have facilitated this session, and I have my salaries coming to me and all of that, but I've been given honorarium by Sterling One Foundation. Is that subject to tax?
Yes. At the end of the year, you are expected to put together all the income you have earned, including that, because you got that in the course of delivering your work.
Hallelujah.
So that's what you do. There's no free money anywhere.
So what you're saying is that as non-profits, we must still do personal income tax away from the payee.
Yeah, if that person, for you, personal income tax, payee is for your staff. Now, when you pay honorarium to people, that one you are not expected to charge that honorarium. However, the person receiving it is an income to that person. So, you use yourself. And you yourself, aside from your organization having deducted tax from your salary, at the end of the year, you are expected to file your own returns, which many individuals do not do. And it's the day you want to apply, the day you want to become a House of Rep member from your place, they will ask you all these questions. Have you been filing your tax returns as an individual? So as an individual, you're expected to also file your tax returns, and in the process, they will ask you your income. They start with salaries, other incomes. So when they ask other incomes, then the total will be gross emolument. So your tax is supposed to be on gross income or gross emolument. So those gross others that you earn from other sources, you may even have passive income. Maybe you have shares somewhere that is you're getting dividend, they are incomes. You may put your money somewhere, you are making interest, they are income. So all of them, you are expected to report all of them aside from your salary. So including the honorarium.
Thank you so much. My interpretation to colleagues is that the salaries you paid, whether you travel and you are paid honorarium or you are given speaker fees and all of those bits, at the end of the year, there must be a tax assessment, all right, that looks at all of this. Then that income is taxed adequately. Am I correct, sir?
You are correct. However, you also consider all the expenses incurred. So if you incur expenses, you are allowed to take them out before tax is applicable. So for your salary, the one your employer remits, you are not allowed to take any expenses. But for other incomes, because those incomes were generated with some expenses, also some expenses. If you ask me to come and speak in New York, for example, and I fly all the way from Nigeria to New York to speak, and let's say you even pay for my flight, there are other expenses I might have incurred. All those expenses are allowed for me to take away from such honorarium that have been given, and sometime after taking away some expense, you may have little or nothing to pay tax on. But that income, that does not stop the fact that income is subject to tax. However, you can take away all expenses incurred before payment.
Thank you so much for that. Please, distinguished participants, do not forget to fill the post-event survey. You've been listening to Mr. Olaride and Dr. Ademefun. Dr. Ademefun, what will be your closing thoughts as I try to round this up? What will be your closing thought on impact reporting?
I'll say that, again, no one size fits all. Let us be more deliberate to documenting project outcomes, the milestones we are achieving, ensure we have all means of verification well documented. It must be evidence-based, and let's not overblow the impact reach that we may have achieved. Let's be factual, and then let's focus on what is important to drive our organizational success. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Let's not overblow or exaggerate our impact. Again, please do not forget to complete the survey. And I'll go back to Mr. Olaride. Your closing thoughts to us as nonprofits who are doing good across communities in Nigeria.
Well, my closing thoughts, I've always said non-profit organization key backbone to supporting government in its social roles. And also, it's always important that for non-profit to be able to make that impact, they also need to be above boards and do comply with the relevant rules and regulations. I also implore you to get education, be aware of your environment, be aware of the rules that govern you, so that you do not run into issues even when you're trying to support the same government. And I implore all of you to do that which is necessary so as to stay above board. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do that which is necessary so that you can stay above board. Again, participants, please do not forget to complete the survey. Let me, on behalf of Sterling One Foundation and the Nigerian Network of NGOs, thank you all for joining this very inspiring session. As you have been told by our colleagues at Sterling One Foundation, the recordings will be shared, and I do hope that you will listen to that. I wish you all the best, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.